Tasmanian Liberal MP Bridget Archer, or at least she calls herself a Liberal, has launched an extraordinary attack on her leader Peter Dutton, saying that he has weaponised, quote unquote, the sexual abuse of Indigenous children for political advantage. Ms Archer has for a long time been a Liberal in party membership only. She's constantly criticising the opposition and carrying on like someone who would be much more at home in the Labor Party. Kind of reminds you a bit of Malcolm Turnbull. She crossed the floor this week to vote against the opposition's push for a royal commission into child sexual abuse in Aboriginal communities. Now, Ms Archer is herself a survivor of child sexual abuse, and she said she would likely support a royal commission if it were to investigate abuse everywhere, not just in Indigenous communities. But she ran off to the left-wing Guardian to tell them that Dutton appeared to, quote, weaponise child abuse for, quote, some perceived political advantage. I'll note that she didn't make those comments about Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who also called for this royal commission. I wonder why that might be. But it seems Ms Archer has found allies in more than 100 Indigenous advocacy groups, which today put out a joint statement condemning the idea of a royal commission and accusing the opposition of political point scoring and demonising communities. Ms Archer led the way and they followed. GetUp Chief Executive Larissa Baldwin-Roberts said calls for a royal commission were a quote-unquote despicable attack. These are the same tactics and lies that were weaponised against communities that resulted in the NT intervention, she said. To suggest that something as awful and serious as child sexual abuse has been weaponised and used for perceived political advantage, as Ms Archer did, or a despicable attack, like GetUp said, on Indigenous people, is disgusting. A genuine issue was raised, a real issue that destroys lives, and those raising it are accused of doing so for political advantage by a member of their own team. Ms Archer went on to say that child sexual abuse was a significant issue right across the country. Are there issues in Indigenous communities? Of course, she said. What's needed is action. We could act now. Now, I don't disagree with that. We do need action. And the point of a royal commission is to force that action. But to say that abuse is a significant issue right across the country may be correct, but it minimises the fact that Indigenous children are more likely, far more likely, to be victims of child abuse. Now, new numbers haven't been released for a while, but on the available numbers from the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, from 2011 to 2012, Indigenous children were 8 times more likely to suffer any kind of abuse or neglect than non-Indigenous children. The Institute of Health and Welfare also says that rates of sexual assault reported to police in 2012 among Indigenous children aged 0 to 9 in New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia and the Northern Territory, they were 2 to 4 times higher than rates among non-Indigenous children. So clearly child abuse and child sexual abuse are more prevalent in Indigenous communities. Why is that not worthy of its own investigation? To say it's happening over here, so that's the same as it happening over there, is a clear nonsense when, on all the available evidence, it happens at much higher rates to Indigenous children. And it's not like we haven't had royal commissions into specific forms of child sexual abuse before. 10 years ago, we launched the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse. That, of course, specifically investigated abuse within institutions such as churches, schools, hospitals, and how they responded to it. It didn't investigate child sexual abuse in homes or Indigenous communities. So if sexual abuse in the church was worthy of a royal commission, and it most definitely was, then why isn't sexual abuse in Indigenous communities worthy of a royal commission? To use the smear that this was political opportunism and weaponising the real suffering of Indigenous children across the country every day was despicable. Mr Dutton says he has privately counselled Ms Archer.
Well, I can have a private conversation with Bridget. As much as I love the Ray Hadley Morning Show, I shan't discuss the private conversations on air. On this issue, though, I don't understand why Bridget crossed the floor. I think it's a very significant issue for our country, as I say. I think she's made a mistake. It's the wrong decision. And it, most importantly, from my perspective, it takes away from the Prime Minister's culpability here.
He ought to ask her to resign from the party. After the failure of the Voice to Parliament referendum, the opposition has tried to throw the discussion forward and get some real action going on serious issues. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Ms Archer, if you disagree so much with your own party, then grow a spine and leave.